The Silence Between Words. Chapter 1. The Last Lecture. The morning light slanted through the tall windows of Emerson Hall, soft and uncertain, as if it too were reluctant to begin the day. The old building held the scent of chalk dust and old books, a perfume known only to universities that have seen too many commencements. Outside, the trees had started to turn, the maples spilling red into the gray October air. Professor Daniel Mercer sat alone at the end of the lecture hall, a paper cup cooling between his palms. He was 72. In the silence, he could hear the faint hum of the ventilation system, a rhythm like breathing. His own breath came slower now, heavier but measured. He looked at the rows of empty seats, those wooden benches polished by decades of restless students, and wondered if they would remember him at all by spring. The door creaked open. "Morning, Dan," said a voice warm and familiar. It was Karen Liu, head of the English department, her scarf wrapped loosely around her neck. She was carrying 2 coffees and a folder full of notes. Her energy, as always, entered the room before she did. "You're early," Daniel said, standing halfway, his knees stiff. "I figured you might be," she replied, handing him a fresh cup. "Big day." He smiled faintly. "Is it?" She gave a small laugh, the kind meant to fill silence rather than answer it. "Retirement lectures are supposed to be celebratory. We're doing cake after. Lemon chiffon. Your favorite." "I thought I preferred relevance," he said dryly. Karen looked at him for a long moment, her expression softening. "You've earned a little irrelevance, Dan." He didn't answer. He turned toward the blackboard, where the faint residue of last semester's notes still lingered like ghosts of thought. He ran his hand across it, feeling the texture of chalk dust on his fingertips. The act felt ritualistic, like a farewell. By noon, the hall had filled. Faculty in cardigans and students with earbuds. A few alumni, gray-haired and smiling, had returned to watch him speak. Daniel stepped up to the lectern, a single sheet of notes in his hand. He didn't need them. He never had. "Good afternoon," he began, his voice carrying that measured calm that had once filled auditoriums. "This will be brief. I've learned that when professors say that, it usually isn't. But in this case, I mean it." A few chuckles rippled through the room. He looked out over the crowd, scanning familiar faces. 46 years. That's a strange measure of time, isn't it? Long enough to lose count of semesters, short enough to remember the first student who asked, "Will this be on the test?" Laughter again, the kind that connects rather than amuses. "When I began teaching," he continued, "I thought knowledge was a mountain to be climbed. I imagined myself helping others up the slope. But after all this time, I think it's more like water. You can't hold it. You can only move with it, hope it shapes you gently." He paused. A long silence, deliberate. "I wanted to tell you something profound today," he said finally. "But what comes instead is simple. The most important things we ever learn are what we learn after we think we already know everything." He folded the paper in half and placed it in his pocket. "Thank you." No grand gesture. No summary of a life's work. Just that. For a moment, the room was quiet. Then came applause, soft at first, then stronger, rolling over him like a wave. Daniel smiled, bowed his head slightly, and stepped down. After the lecture, he lingered. The cake was indeed lemon chiffon. Sweet but not too sweet. The kind of thing people choose for polite occasions. Students approached him one by one. "Professor Mercer, I just wanted to say, you changed how I read poetry. I didn't get it at first, but now." He nodded, thanked them, smiled. Each word felt both real and remote. He'd spent a lifetime trying to make them see beyond words. Now words were all that remained. Karen caught up with him near the doors. "You did well," she said. "You always do." "Thank you for organizing everything," he replied. "You didn't have to." "I wanted to." She hesitated. "Are you staying in town?" "For a while," he said. "I still have some things to sort out." "Like what?" He looked past her, toward the hallway lined with faculty portraits. "Like what comes after the end." She smiled sadly. "You'll find something. You always do." But even as she said it, both knew it wasn't true. That evening, the campus was quiet. The lamps along the quad glowed amber against the fading blue. Daniel walked slowly past the library, his cane tapping rhythmically on the stone path. He could hear faint music from the student center, something electronic pulsing. Life continuing without him. He stopped under the great elm tree near the fountain, the same tree under which he'd proposed to Eleanor 50 years ago. She had worn a green dress that day. The memory rose unbidden, like a photograph held too close to the light. Eleanor had been gone 5 years now, cancer quick and merciless. He still talked to her sometimes, in the small hours when the world thinned. "Ellie," he murmured into the autumn air. "They gave me cake." A breeze stirred the leaves, whispering through the branches. For a moment, he imagined it as her laughter. Back home, the house felt cavernous. Books lined every wall, their spines fading like old friends. He made tea, sat by the window, and watched the streetlights flicker on. A letter sat unopened on the desk. He'd received it 2 days ago. Heavy paper, embossed seal. The return address was from Cambridge, Massachusetts. He'd almost thrown it away, assuming it was another alumni appeal. But something about the handwriting had stopped him. He opened it now carefully. "Dear Professor Mercer, my name is Dr. Maya Fielding. I am a research fellow at the Harvard Center for Historical Studies. I hope this letter finds you well. We recently came across a series of unpublished manuscripts believed to be connected to your late wife, Eleanor Mercer. The documents were found among the papers of a former publisher who passed away last year. We would be honored to discuss their provenance with you. Please contact me at your convenience. Sincerely, Maya Fielding, Harvard University." Daniel read the letter twice, then a third time. Unpublished manuscripts? Eleanor? She'd written poetry, of course, unpublished, private, delicate as her handwriting. But she'd destroyed most of it before she died. He'd watched her do it, one page at a time, feeding the words to flame. His tea had gone cold. He stared out the window, the night pressing close. A few drops of rain traced slow paths down the glass. What could possibly have survived? The next morning, he called the number on the letter. "Dr. Fielding's office," said a bright young voice. "This is Daniel Mercer returning her letter," he said. "One moment, please." A pause, then another voice came on the line, low, clear, and professional. "Professor Mercer? This is Maya Fielding. Thank you for calling." "Yes, I received your letter. You mentioned manuscripts." "Yes, we found a small collection, poems, letters, and a short prose piece attributed to your wife. They were stored in a box labeled Mercer, yet private." "Where did you find them?" "In the estate of a retired editor, Charles Dennett. You may have known him." Daniel frowned. "I haven't heard that name in years." "There's something else," she continued. "Among the papers, there's a note in your wife's handwriting. It references you directly." A pulse of silence passed between them. "What does it say?" he asked quietly. "I think you'd better see it for yourself," Maya said. "Would you be willing to come to Cambridge?" He hesitated. The thought of travel exhausted him. Yet something in her tone, professional but edged with curiosity, stirred a feeling he hadn't known in years, the pull of the unknown. "Yes," he said finally. "I'll come." "Good," she replied. "We'll make the arrangements." "And Professor Mercer." "Yes. I think you'll find this significant." When the line went dead, he sat there for a long time, the receiver still in his hand. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight spilled weakly through the clouds, catching on the leaves that clung stubbornly to the trees. He thought of Eleanor again, her voice, her laughter, her poems that had once filled their home like light. He looked down at the letter on his desk. It trembled slightly in his hand. Something had been left behind, something he was never meant to find. And suddenly, after so many years of endings, there was the faint, unmistakable scent of beginning. Chapter 2, The Woman from Cambridge. The train cut north through a gray October afternoon, its windows reflecting fields already stripped bare by harvest. Daniel sat by the window, a small suitcase at his feet, watching the landscape blur into soft shapes of rust and gold. The steady rhythm of the tracks calmed him, the way only mechanical motion could, a comfort older than thought. He'd almost canceled the trip that morning. The idea of Cambridge, of Harvard's clean red brick precision, had seemed both distant and intrusive. But the name on that letter, Eleanor Mercer, had been enough. The echo of her handwriting, her careful loops, her signature that curved slightly upward at the end. He touched the envelope again, folded in his coat pocket. The paper felt heavier now, as if it had absorbed the weight of what it carried. The conductor's voice broke through his thoughts. Next stop, South Station. Daniel nodded absently, though no one had asked. He closed his eyes for a moment. The rhythmic sway of the car reminded him of years of commuting to conferences, guest lectures, symposiums, an endless parade of polite introductions and thin coffee. But this was different. There was no lecture this time, no audience, no purpose except one he could not yet name. He opened his eyes again. The sky outside had dimmed to pewter. Maya Fielding was waiting for him at the station, holding a paper cup and scanning the arriving crowd. She looked younger than her voice had suggested, mid-30s perhaps. Her hair was pulled back in a neat twist, her coat dark and unadorned. There was something composed about her, almost still. "Professor Mercer," she said, extending a hand. "Yes, Dr. Fielding, thank you for meeting me. It's my pleasure. I know the trip is a long one." "Not so long," he said, though his back disagreed. They stepped out into the brisk afternoon. The air smelled faintly of rain and diesel. Maya led him toward a waiting car, a small electric sedan that purred rather than rumbled. As they drove, she said, "I've read some of your work. Echoes of Stillness was on our syllabus last spring." Daniel smiled faintly. "That book's older than most of your students." "True," she said, "but still worth reading." He looked at her, curious. "Do they think so?" "They argue about it," she said. "Which is the highest compliment, really?" He chuckled. "I suppose I'll take that." They passed under the arch of Harvard Yard, its iron gate open wide. The trees inside were just beginning to turn, their colors deepening toward fire. Daniel felt an odd tightening in his chest. He had lectured here once, years ago, in a hall that smelled of varnish and ambition. Eleanor had been with him then, sitting quietly in the front row, taking notes no one had asked her to take. The archive building stood apart from the main campus, a tall, modern structure of glass and pale stone. Inside, the air was cool, still, and faintly metallic, the kind of silence that belonged to places where paper ruled. Maya led him through a series of secured doors until they reached a small reading room. On the table sat a single gray box, no larger than a shoebox, with a handwritten label, Mercery, Private/Correspondence and Manuscripts. Daniel stared at it. His throat tightened. "This is everything?" he asked. "Yes," Maya said softly. "We haven't opened any of it beyond preliminary cataloging. I thought it best you see it first." He hesitated. "Do you mind if I?" "Of course not. Take your time." She stepped back, giving him space. Daniel reached for the lid. His fingers trembled slightly. The cardboard gave a soft sigh as he lifted it. Inside were several envelopes, a few folded sheets, and one small leather-bound notebook, cracked along the spine. He lifted the notebook first. The leather felt familiar, smooth, worn thin at the edges. He recognized it instantly. Eleanor's travel journal. She had carried it everywhere during their first sabbatical in Europe. He opened to the first page. Her handwriting curved across the paper in clean blue ink. "Florence, June 1979. The light here feels older than time itself." He exhaled slowly. The words carried her voice, the rhythm of her mind. He turned the page. "Daniel says memory is a kind of faith. I think it's more like music. You can't hold it, only feel it pass through you." He closed the book gently. For a moment he could almost smell the Italian air, the dry sweetness of stone and basil. "There are letters too," Maya said quietly. "One of them is addressed to you." He looked up. "To me." She nodded and handed him a single sealed envelope. The paper had yellowed slightly, the flap sealed with a faint trace of wax. His name was written across the front in Eleanor's hand. He held it for a long time before opening it. Inside, the ink had faded but was still legible. "My dearest Dan, if you are reading this, then I never found the courage to tell you what I meant to. There are things we cannot confess while the world still believes in our certainty. You always said truth was the simplest thing. I found it otherwise. Do you remember the poem I wrote in Paris? The one I would not let you read? It wasn't mine, not entirely. It belonged to someone else first. Someone who loved before I knew how. I am leaving this with Charles because he understands the silence between words. If he has done as I asked, then perhaps now you will understand what I could not say aloud. With all my love, E. Daniel's eyes blurred. For a moment, the world narrowed to the trembling script on the page. He read it again, slower this time, feeling each word as a pulse. Someone else. Someone who loved before I knew how. He folded the letter and set it down. The silence in the room grew thick, humming faintly with unspoken things. Maya spoke softly. Professor Mercer, are you all right? He nodded, though he wasn't sure. Yes. I thought I knew her completely. Maya's expression softened. Maybe this was her way of making sure you still had something to learn. He gave a faint, bitter smile. Eleanor would have liked that. They spent the next hour cataloging the rest of the box. There were drafts of poems, some familiar, others entirely new. Letters addressed to names he didn't recognize. One in particular caught his attention. A note dated 1978, signed only with the initial L. Your poem has stayed with me. The river, the stillness, yes, I remember. I will never forget Florence, nor the choice we both pretended wasn't one. The handwriting was firm, masculine, elegant. Daniel read it twice, then set it aside. Maya watched him carefully. Do you think it was someone she knew before you married? He shook his head slowly. No. That year we were already together. Florence was our first trip after her mother died. The name L echoed in his mind. He could feel the shape of jealousy there, but it wasn't the sharp, young kind. This was something duller, deeper, like a bruise under the skin. I'd like to take these back with me, he said quietly. I'll need to arrange a loan form, Maya replied. But yes, that should be fine. The notebook and the letters are yours, of course. Thank you. As they left the archive, evening had fallen. The lamps along the Charles River glowed faintly against the mist. Daniel walked beside her in silence, his thoughts heavy and disordered. Finally, Maya said, I didn't mean to intrude, but why did she stop publishing? He hesitated. She didn't stop. She just stopped showing anyone. Because of you? He looked at her, startled by the directness. She didn't flinch. You were both writers. That can't have been easy. He exhaled slowly. No, it wasn't. But she never said she resented it. Maybe she didn't have to. He turned away, staring out across the water. The river shimmered under the streetlights, a restless mirror. When they reached the corner, she stopped. I can drive you to your hotel. I think I'd rather walk, he said. The air helps. She nodded. I'll call tomorrow about the paperwork. He thanked her, then watched her disappear into the mist, her figure dissolving between the lights. He walked for nearly an hour. The night was damp and full of quiet sounds, the whisper of traffic, the slow murmur of water against stone. He carried the notebook under his arm, the letter folded in his coat pocket. At a small bridge, he stopped and leaned against the railing. Below him, the river flowed with its quiet certainty, carrying everything forward, unburdened by memory. He thought of Eleanor again, of her laughter, her silences, the way she would look at him when he was lost in thought. He had always believed they'd shared everything worth knowing. But now, standing over that dark water, he wasn't so sure. He took out the letter from his pocket and read it once more under the yellow light. The words shimmered faintly in the damp air. Someone who loved before I knew how. He folded it again, more carefully this time. A breeze lifted off the river, cool and sharp, brushing against his face. He closed his eyes and let it pass over him. Behind him, a voice broke the silence. Professor Mercer? He turned. A woman stood at the far end of the bridge, tall, wrapped in a dark coat. The light was too dim to see her face clearly. Yes, he said. She stepped forward. I'm sorry to startle you. You don't know me, but I think we need to talk. It's about Eleanor. His pulse quickened. Who are you? The woman hesitated, then said quietly, My name is Lillian. Lillian Dennett. The name struck him like a chord. Charles Dennett's daughter, she added. The man who kept your wife's papers. He gripped the railing, steadying himself. What is it you need to tell me, Miss Dennett? She looked past him toward the dark water. Not here. Not tonight. But you should know, my father didn't tell you everything. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, her footsteps fading into the mist. Daniel stood alone on the bridge, the letter still clutched in his hand, the sound of the river rising beneath him. Something had opened, a door he didn't know existed, and beyond it lay a truth that would not let him rest. Chapter 3: The Shadow of the River. The next morning came gray and thin. Cambridge lay under a low ceiling of fog, the kind that softened every sound and dulled every edge. Daniel woke early in his hotel room, the letter still on the nightstand beside the lamp. He hadn't slept much. Eleanor's words kept circling in his head, looping endlessly like a forgotten melody. He made tea from the packet provided by the hotel, a bitter approximation of what tea should be, and sat by the window, watching the mist roll over the city. Across the street, bicycles glided past like quiet thoughts. He replayed the scene on the bridge. The woman, her voice calm but urgent, her eyes hidden in shadow. Lillian Dennett. He remembered Charles Dennett vaguely, a man with impeccable suits and a habit of pausing too long before he spoke. They'd met in London once, in a cafe filled with smoke and arguments about literature. Eleanor had admired Dennett's taste, his restraint. He understands silence, she had said then. Now those words haunted him. He picked up the letter again, tracing Eleanor's handwriting with his finger. There was something final in the way she'd written. If you are reading this, then I never found the courage to tell you. He wondered if she'd meant it to be found after her death, or if she'd hoped it never would. The knock at the door startled him. 3 firm raps. He opened it to find Maya Fielding standing there, her hair damp from the mist, a folder tucked under her arm. "Good morning," she said. "I hope I'm not too early." "Not at all," he said, though he hadn't expected her. "Come in." She stepped inside and looked around the modest room. "I wanted to drop off the loan papers for the manuscripts. I thought we could go over them together." "Of course." He gestured toward the small table by the window. As she spread out the forms, she glanced at the letter on the nightstand. "You found something new?" He hesitated, then nodded. "A woman came to see me last night. Lillian Dennett, Charles's daughter." Maya's brow furrowed. "Here? How did she find you?" "I don't know. She said her father didn't tell me everything." Maya leaned back slightly. "That's strange. I didn't realize Dennett had family still living nearby." "Neither did I," he said. She seemed certain about something, but she wouldn't explain. Maya studied him for a moment. "Do you think it's worth finding out?" He looked down at his hands. The skin was pale and thin now, the veins like faint rivers. "At this point," he said softly, "what else do I have to lose?" They agreed to meet Lillian that afternoon. Maya offered to come with him. "For context," she said, though he suspected it was partly concern. Lillian had suggested a cafe on Mount Auburn Street, a quiet place tucked behind an old bookstore. When they arrived, she was already there, seated near the window with a small notebook and a cup of black coffee. She rose as they approached. "Professor Mercer." "Dr. Fielding." Her voice was calm, precise. Up close, Daniel saw that she was in her 40s, perhaps, her features sharply drawn, her expression composed in the way of someone used to hiding impatience. "Thank you for meeting us," Daniel said. "I wasn't sure you would," she replied. "My father always said you dislike surprises." He gave a thin smile. "Your father wasn't wrong." They sat. The cafe was nearly empty, the air rich with the smell of espresso and old paper from the adjoining bookstore. Lillian folded her hands. "You're here because of my father's box, I assume. The one labeled with your wife's name." "Yes," Daniel said. "We found letters, poems, a journal, and a note from Eleanor that mentioned him." She nodded slowly. "I know. I helped him organize those papers before he died. But he didn't give you everything." "What do you mean?" "There was another envelope," she said. "One he locked away separately. He told me it wasn't for the university archives. It was for you, when the time was right." Daniel felt his pulse quicken. "Do you have it?" "I do," she said, opening her bag. She took out a small envelope, yellowed and brittle at the edges. On it, in Eleanor's handwriting, was a single word: Florence. Daniel stared at it. "May I?" "Of course." He opened the flap carefully. Inside was a single folded page, thinner than the others, and a black and white photograph. The photo showed 2 figures standing by a riverbank. One was unmistakably Eleanor, her head tilted back, laughing, her hair caught by the wind. The other figure, a man, stood beside her with his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. His face was turned just enough for Daniel to recognize it. It was Charles Dennett. He felt the room tilt slightly, as if gravity had forgotten itself. Maya leaned forward. "Is that?" "Yes," Daniel said quietly. "It's him." He unfolded the letter. Florence, June 1978. "Charles, you said the river keeps its secrets. I am beginning to believe you. The world feels suspended here, caught between sunlight and confession. I should feel guilty, but I don't. You understand the silence in me, the one Daniel cannot touch. Perhaps someday I will find the courage to choose between them. For now, let the river keep its promise. Eleanor." Daniel sat very still. The cafe noise faded until all he could hear was the faint hiss of the espresso machine and the thudding of his own pulse. Maya looked at him with quiet concern, but she didn't speak. After a long silence, he folded the letter and set it down. "How long have you known about this?" Lillian's expression remained steady. "Since I found it 3 years ago. My father told me not to send it. He said the truth serves no one when it arrives too late." "He was right," Daniel murmured. She hesitated. "But I couldn't ignore it. I thought you should see it before someone else decided what story to tell." "Someone else?" Maya asked. Lillian looked at her. "There's an article being prepared, an academic piece on Eleanor's unpublished works. One of the researchers is already speculating about her relationship with my father. I wanted you both to know before it becomes public." Daniel let out a long breath. "So that's what this is, damage control." Lillian met his gaze. "No, this is respect. My father admired your wife. He didn't want her to be reduced to gossip. Neither do I." He looked at her closely. "Did he love her?" She didn't answer right away. Then softly, "Yes, he did. But not the way you think. It wasn't an affair in the usual sense. It was," she paused, searching, "an intimacy of silence. 2 people who understood what it meant to speak through what they didn't say." Daniel absorbed that. He had no words for the mixture of grief and relief that tangled in his chest. "May I keep this?" he asked finally, nodding toward the letter. "Of course," Lillian said. "It was meant for you." He thanked her quietly. When she left, Maya and Daniel remained seated. The fog outside had thickened, blurring the street beyond the window. Maya spoke first. "Are you all right?" He smiled faintly. "That question seems to be following me lately. I suppose it's the obvious one." He nodded, then looked down at the photograph again. "Eleanor once said that love isn't what survives us. It's what refuses to." Maya tilted her head. "Do you think she'd still say that now?" "I don't know," he said. "But I think I finally understand what she meant." That evening, Daniel returned to his hotel and placed the photograph on the desk beside the first letter. The 2 pieces of paper looked like fragments of a larger truth, one he wasn't sure he wanted completed. He poured himself a small glass of whiskey and sat by the window. Outside, the fog moved slowly across the Charles, wrapping the bridges in silence. He took the notebook, Eleanor's travel journal, and opened it again. Near the end, he found a passage he hadn't noticed before, written faintly in pencil. "We spend our lives learning to speak, but the things that matter most are never said. Daniel listens with words. Charles listens without them. I live somewhere between the 2. He closed the book, his hands trembling slightly. There was a soft knock on the door. He hesitated, then stood and opened it. Maya stood there again, holding her phone. Her expression was uneasy. "I just got a message from the archive," she said. "Someone broke into the storage room tonight." "What?" "They don't know what was taken yet. But the Mercer box, your wife's papers, it's gone." Daniel stared at her, the words sinking like stones. "The box," he repeated. "All of it." She nodded. "All of it." Outside, a police siren wailed faintly in the fog, then faded. Daniel sank into the nearest chair, the photograph still clutched in his hand. Somewhere in the dark, someone was reaching for Eleanor again. And this time, not with love. Chapter 4: The Missing Box. Morning came reluctantly, dragging a colorless light across the hotel walls. Daniel sat at the small table by the window, staring at his untouched breakfast, toast gone cold, a cup of coffee turning to sludge. He felt the familiar heaviness in his chest. Not grief this time, not quite. Something slower, more corrosive. The quiet knowledge that the past had started moving again, and that he could no longer stop it. The knock came precisely at 8. Maya stood in the doorway, hair tied back, phone in hand, her voice clipped with tension. "They confirmed it," she said. "The Mercer box is gone. Everything, letters, drafts, the journal. It was taken sometime after 9 last night." Daniel rubbed his temples. How is that even possible? They have security codes, cameras. "They do," she said, closing the door behind her. "But whoever did it knew how to get in. There was no sign of forced entry. The only record is a badge swipe, archivist clearance level." He looked up. "Yours?" "No," she said quickly. "Mine's been deactivated since I left at 6. But there are only 3 people with that clearance." "Who?" "Me, the department director, and one other, someone new. A visiting researcher. His name's Liam Dorr." The name landed with a strange resonance, like a faint echo through a tunnel. "Dorr," Daniel repeated. "Does the initial L mean anything to you?" Maya blinked. "From the letter? The one Eleanor received?" "Yes. It's possible, I suppose," she said slowly. "He's in his late 40s, British. Came in 2 months ago to study modernist correspondences. Said he was working on a book about literary secrecy." Daniel leaned back in his chair. "Of course he is." They met the police at the archive 2 hours later. The building, usually so still, buzzed now with tension. A uniformed officer took notes while the head archivist, a nervous man in tweed, wrung his hands. "The cameras stopped recording at 9:14 p.m., he explained. "A technical malfunction, apparently. When they came back online 20 minutes later, the Mercer collection was gone." "Gone how?" Daniel asked. The archivist hesitated. The box itself was missing from the shelf. No sign of break-in, no tampering with the database. Just gone. Maya showed the officer her ID, then turned to the archivist. "Where's Liam Dorr now?" "He's not on campus today. Said he was taking a research trip to Providence." Daniel folded his arms. "And you believed him?" "He's a fellow with Harvard credentials, Professor Mercer," the archivist said, defensive. "We don't usually suspect our scholars of theft." Daniel's voice hardened. "Then perhaps you should start." The officer, a patient man with tired eyes, cut in. "We'll contact Providence and see if anyone matching that name checked into the train or bus lines. But it might take some time." "Time is what he's counting on," Daniel muttered. Maya touched his arm gently. "Let them handle it," she said. "There's only so much we can do here." He looked at her, his expression dark with something between anger and disbelief. "You don't understand. Those papers weren't just research. They were her. What's left of her." Maya's voice softened. "I do understand. But whoever took them wanted something specific. Maybe not all of it." He nodded slowly. The logic made sense. The feeling didn't. That afternoon they walked the campus in silence. The fog had lifted, leaving behind a cold, brittle sunlight. Students hurried past, laughing, clutching books, oblivious to the quiet panic that now pressed on Daniel's chest. Near the river they stopped. The water was calm again, a mirror to nothing. Maya spoke first. "There's something you're not saying." He kept his eyes on the water. "Eleanor and I, our marriage wasn't a secret, but there were things in it that were." "Things like Charles Dennett?" He nodded. "And maybe others. That letter from the man signing only L. If it was this Liam Dorr's ancestor, or someone connected to him, then the theft isn't random." "You think he's after something more personal?" "I think he's after a story," Daniel said. "Everyone is these days. No one cares about truth unless it sells." Maya studied him for a long moment. "And what are you after?" He smiled faintly. "Forgiveness, maybe. Or a reason not to hate her for being human." She said nothing, just nodded, her gaze following the slow current. That evening, back at the hotel, Daniel found a plain envelope slipped under his door. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, an old poem, handwritten in Eleanor's looping script. The river remembers what the sky forgets. Each reflection is a lie we choose to keep. I write your name in silence, in the space between breaths. If you find these words, forgive the current that carried them away. Below the poem, a single line was written in different handwriting, neater, sharper. You're not the only one searching, Professor. There was no signature, only a faint impression of water along the paper's edge, as if it had been soaked and dried again. Daniel sat heavily on the bed, the letter trembling in his hands. Maya called just then. I've been looking into Door, she said. You were right. He's not a visiting scholar. There's no record of him at Harvard or anywhere else. His credentials were forged. He closed his eyes. Then who the hell is he? I don't know, she said. But I think he's been reading Eleanor's work longer than any of us. There was silence on the line. Then she added, he sent me an email just now. No text, just an image attachment. It's a photograph of your wife's notebook, open to the last page. Daniel felt his breath catch. What does it say? Maya hesitated. It says, the truth isn't buried in the river, Daniel. It's waiting. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He sat by the window, the lights of the Charles flickering in the distance like distant signals. The poem lay open on the desk beside the photograph of Eleanor and Dennett. He thought of the stolen box, the vanished manuscripts, the unknown thief, the words that refused to die. Eleanor's last line echoed in his mind. Let the river keep its promise. He rose, put on his coat, and stepped into the cold night. The city was quiet, the air sharp with the smell of rain. He walked toward the river, his cane striking softly against the cobblestones. At the bridge he stopped, the same bridge where Lillian had found him 2 nights before. The water moved slowly below, its surface dark and restless. And there, resting against the railing, was another envelope. No one was around. No sound but the low hum of the city beyond. He picked it up. Inside was a single photograph, Eleanor again, sitting at a table in what looked like a hotel room, her face half turned toward the camera. On the back, in faint pencil, was a date, Florence, 1978. And beneath it, 2 words written in Eleanor's unmistakable hand, forgive me. He stared at the image until his eyes blurred, the wind pulling at his coat. Behind him, a car engine started softly, then faded into the distance. Daniel turned toward the sound, but the street was empty. Only the echo of wheels on wet pavement remained. He looked once more at the photograph, at her eyes frozen forever in mid-turn, as though she were about to speak. And for the first time in years, Daniel Mercer whispered into the night, tell me what you're trying to say, Ellie. The river gave no answer, only the slow, patient sound of something larger than truth moving beneath it.